you join us for today's ESPC community webinar. Today, I'm joined by Raisa Eskins, Microsoft MVP, who'll be presenting SQL Server 2025, SSMS 22, and Fabric, and they married happily ever after. We love hearing what you have to say, so be sure and join the conversation about today's webinar and more on X. Our handle is at ESPC_community and our hashtag is #ESPC26. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which updates the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, espc.tech, and clicking the Learning Hub tab at the top of the page. Don't forget to join us for our next webinar, Beyond Internal Analytics, Building Governed Customer-Facing Intelligence on Power BI, presented by Brian DeLuca, taking place this evening, Tuesday the 14th of July at 4 p.m. CEST. To register, visit w.espc.tech/Learning Hub Content Weeks Microsoft Fabric Week. Time's ticking. Your future network is waiting. Don't miss the conversations, insights, and opportunities everyone will be talking about long after the event ends. Secure your place today and be in a room where it happens. Save €300 with code Fabric Week when you book your ticket. Before you switch on your out of office, make one last smart move. Secure your place at FabCon and SQL Europe in Barcelona and take advantage of our early bird rates. Book by the 31st of July to lock in early bird pricing. Then use code Fabric Week to save an additional €300 on your ticket. Enjoy your summer knowing your place is reserved at Europe's leading Microsoft Data and AI conference. If you haven't entered already for your chance to win Lego, scan the QR code to enter today's giveaway from our Microsoft Fabric Week sponsor, Acteris. T's and C's apply. As always, if you have questions at any stage during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the chat box and Raisa will answer them throughout the session. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to hand you over to today's presenter. Hello, Raisa. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Sean. Let me see if I can share my screen, because it's always interesting how this works, and this should be the correct one. Yep. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are or whenever you're seeing this session. Welcome. There's a bit of a weird trick in this session when you're looking at the background, at least of this slide, because it shows Dexter's Lab. If you don't know this was a cartoon series that ran at late 90s, early 2000s on Cartoon Network, which is also maybe showing my age a little bit. But it's also kind of sort of the way that I work. If you'd see the intro video, you'd see Dexter pressing a button, nothing's happening until Didi connects to plugs, and all of a sudden everything works. This is kind of sort of how Microsoft works with Fabric as well. Every now and then we try stuff out, and all of a sudden it works or it doesn't. So this session today will be on SQL Server 2025 using SSMS 22 and Microsoft Fabric to mirror your data from that specific instance into Fabric. But let's start with an introduction to mirroring, because what is mirroring, and are there other ways of SQL Server data replication? Well, when you're talking about mirroring, a lot of people will kind of sort of react in this way, because mirroring is ancient, and I'll get back to that one in a few seconds. If you want to mirror, nowadays there's a list of choices, or if you want to replicate data, that's the correct word. Your first option would be high availability and disaster recovery. If you want to do this, you'll need 2 or more Windows server in a failover cluster. You might need a file witness to secure quorum, and quorum means that the entire cluster knows where the majority is. So it knows this is the leading server, and if you're not leading server, then you're not going to accept any incoming queries to add or modify data. It can fail over either manual or automatic, and it's near instant replication of data. This is, however, within SQL Server. Another option can be to use log shipping. It's frankly the easiest of them all. You just point your logs to a different server, you replay the logs, and you're done. It's also maybe kind of sort of ancient technology, but it just works. And there's a new kid on the block, which is called Managed Instance Link, which is quite expensive, to be honest, not because of the link itself, but because you need an Azure managed instance as the target, and those usually don't come that very cheap. But it is an ideal way to replicate your data directly into Azure. And because it's a managed instance, it's quite close to everything you have on your on-prem SQL Server. Now, if you want to go into the headache area of things, you can try and use replication. You can choose between merge, transactional, or snapshot replication. And it really depends on what you need and how much you value your sleep at night. If you're doing snapshot, which we've done, I think it was 10, 12 years ago for one customer, it's like a full override. It just takes a snapshot of the database and publishes it to another server, and then it's done. One shot, done. And we did this every night. It took around 4 hours. It worked most of the time. Sometimes it broke. If you do merge replication, you can merge multiple primary databases, for instance, all over the world, into one database, and the merge replication makes sure that all the data gets together. And if you're doing transaction replication, it just replicates transactions between instances, but not in the merge way. So there's always a leading database. It sounds really cool. The thing is, it's hard to solve the issues when they arise. You can also do change data capture, which essentially just adds a sort of readable table to your regular tables with all the changes. And you can read them, you can connect to the CDC tables and extract all the changes for your own process. Sounds easy enough. I've seen it in use quite a number of times. The thing is, there are also a lot of providers and third-party suppliers who say, no, we can't handle this on our database because reasons. Now, there's another option nowadays as well, which is called change tracking, which you can see is kind of sort of a lightweight version of CDC, also allowing for change data to be queried and extracted. It doesn't have the history. It's a lightweight version, and I've seen it in productions a few times, but not that much yet. But hang on. Where did the mirroring go? Because we were talking about mirroring. The thing is, when you're looking at SQL Server, mirroring has been deprecated since 2012. And this is where things will start to get confusing. Because if you're looking at Fabric mirroring, it's not SQL mirroring. It's a different technique. There's a whole different engine running underneath it. And there are a lot of things happening. When you're looking in Fabric, it's not called mirroring, it's called replication, but it is not SQL replication because it doesn't have all those moving parts from SQL that are associated with either snapshot, transactional, or merge replication. And to get stuff even more confusing, if you're running SQL 2016 to 2022, you're falling back on CDC. When you're in 2025, you've got to change event streaming, which is essentially just a stream of changing data into Fabric in JSON format. You can read it. It's saved in flat files, and you can do with it whatever you want. In essence, it just lands into Fabric. So a lot of confusion in naming, which is one of the things that got me tapping my desk when I was reading about it. Like, please make a choice. So this is the new kid on the block. When you're opening Fabric, you'll see this, and you've deployed it. You'll see this icon, this mirror database icon and type. And there's one very important part to know here. That is that you can only connect to read-write databases. So you cannot get away with read-only secondaries. For instance, if you've got a high availability cluster where you've got your primary that's doing all the work, and you've got a readable secondary for reporting purposes or whatever you want, you cannot point Fabric mirroring to that readable secondary, which may be a bummer for some people. But there we are. Yeah, it integrates seamlessly into Microsoft Fabric because the data is stored in Delta Parquet format, even though Delta Parquet isn't a thing, but Microsoft called it, named it. It integrates seamlessly, which means I can easily pick up data from my mirror database and process it upstream, downstream, however you want to call it. It's usually downstream for reporting, for whatever you need. And it works. And as I mentioned, it's only from read-write databases. So now that I've got you confused, but also set the stage a little bit, this is me. My name is Reitze Eskens. I'm a technical consultant at Action's Business Analytics in the Netherlands, which means I do a lot of exploring of new features. I try stuff out. I break stuff. I can make mistakes. And I try to learn from them, and those learnings is something I try to share with all of you. I'm a Microsoft MVP, at least I am today. Renewal is due tomorrow, so somewhere during the day tomorrow, I'll find out if I'm still an MVP or not, which, well, whatever happens, we'll see. And I've just been appointed, given the Redgate Community Ambassador 2026 badge, which means Redgate likes me as well. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, which is really helpful in training people and helping them get up to speed with the latest content of Microsoft. Enough about me. Let's go into the moving parts, because we want to know what's actually happening. There's a lot moving. Also, I'll show you most of these things in the demo later on. So first of all, you need SQL Server. It needs to be there. Depending on the version, you need to enable change event streaming, change data capture. It needs to be there. You might need Azure Arc. If you're going for the 2025 option, which I would advise you to do, you need Azure Arc for the connection from Azure to your local system, which is a little bit fiddly to set up. Also outside of the scope of this session. On the other hand, I've written a blog about it on my website, sqlreitze.com, where you can read how that works. It's not that hard. The thing is, you need some permissions. If you're not using SQL 2025, but 2022 or 2016 or something in between, you need the on-premises data gateway, which is in essence just a point-to-site VPN connection from your server into Fabric, encrypted traffic. No one can read it, and you've got full control over the thing. So if you think for some moment that I want to kill it, just turn off the on-premises data gateway and your connection to Fabric is gone. It will open a whole slew of funny error messages, but that's a whole different story. Within Fabric, you've got your Fabric Mirror database, which you can query almost like it's a regular database. And we'll see if you can insert or update data. So let's go into the main setup. If you're using SQL 2016 to 2022, because that's something I'm running into at customers quite a lot of times, that they're not yet ready to migrate to 2025. I see where they're getting from. On the other hand, 2025 has some really cool stuff. What you need to do is create an account with sufficient privileges because you need to be a member of the sysadmin role. This can be a red flag for some companies that we're not going to do that. We need someone else to do that, which is fine. Just be aware that you need that role because you need to enable CDC. That's the first step. On the database, on the tables, you need to replicate. You also need to install the on-premises data gateway, which means that not only do you need permissions to install that on-premises data gateway, you also need permissions within Fabric to make sure the connection comes alive. You need to be able to connect to Fabric and have some permissions over there. It is what it is. And then you need to create a connection within Fabric, where it's saying, all right, I'm going to use this on-premises data gateway. I'm going to connect to this database, which means I'm using the SQL Server connection item in the massive drop-down list. I'm going to authenticate, and I'm moving on. And next, you can create your mirror database, essentially, where you can just choose the connection. We'll see that in the demo. Hopefully, it works for 2025, by the way. But you can create your mirror database, and then data will start streaming in. Once CDC is set up, you can remove a lot of permissions. You only need the ones you can see on the slide here. So it is less invasive, still you need a lot of permissions, but it's not as bad as it was. When we're going to SQL 2025, things are a little bit different because you need to start in Azure to start the Azure Arc for SQL process, which means you need permissions on a subscription in a resource group to create the item. You may need to enable the resource provider within Azure to be able to deploy Azure Arc. Some people may have opinions, so you need to have a chat with the people who are running Azure. When you finish the Azure Arc process, it's not like the connection is there. What happens is essentially a PowerShell script is returned that you need to run on the server hosting SQL Server because that's where the connection is being made. So it's connecting to Azure. It's not like Azure is coming in. Kind of sort of like the on-premises data gateway works, but it's different. When this process is done, it will create the Azure Arc resource for the server and the instances. By the way, this is something I will not demo because I tried it a few times and it takes quite some time. So I've already prepared that part, but I'll show you what it looks like in the Azure portal. Do not forget this step. You need to enable the system assigned managed identity on the server and the database, which means you need to enable that one within Azure. And then you need to add that system assigned managed identity to the workspace, but also to your database. Because it needs to connect, it needs to authenticate in a way. And it uses that system assigned managed identity to authenticate and get the correct data. Then you create a connection, but you're not using the on-premises data gateway because that's no longer necessary. And you can create your mirror database resource. Now, most people would like to see what's happening. Let's be honest. Fabric portal is a bit minimal. It will say it's working or it's not working. End of story.
Right, so there's a question in if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just hi, any options for versions older than 2016?
Officially, not for this kind of mirroring. If you want to get data within or inside Fabric, there are other options I will list at the end of the session, but you could explore something like the copy data job, which will help you in creating quite easily to create incremental loads from that database into Fabric. Having said that, I did not try if using CDC on SQL 2014 actually works, or 2012, or whichever version you're on, to create a mirror database within Fabric. So it would be a nice exercise, but I haven't got a 2014 database lying around right now.
Perfect, thank you.
No worries. If there are other questions, please let me know. As I mentioned, mirroring in the Fabric portal is minimal. So you need to check out SQL Server to find out if things are still running correctly as well. But this part is needs some work in my opinion. Because if you want to find out what's happening, there are procedures, but they're a little bit hidden because they're mentioning Synapse link, which is in my mind quite weird because I'm not pushing data to Synapse, I'm pushing data to Fabric, and they're quite hidden in the way that you really need to dig through all the pages of the documentation to find all the procedures and see what they're doing. And some are less well documented. Let's put it like that. That's not something negative, just something to be aware of. So the initial process to set it up, you initiate it from Fabric. You say, I want a new mirror database. SQL Server then sends the initial snapshot to a Fabric landing zone in CSV format, which means if you've got access to that to the OneLake, you might be able to read all the data. This then is converted to Parquet with Delta, and then you get a message: your database is mirrored, which is cool. It works. In all honesty, there's not much more to it than this. So what about updates? Every 5 seconds, SQL Server checks on changes in the log file. Like, hey, has there been an update, a delete, an insert? Did anything happen? Then the changes are pushed to the Fabric landing zone, again in CSV format. Fabric reads the CSV and creates new Parquet files. Then those files are added to the data and to the Delta folder structure, and the data is available. Now, one of the questions I had towards Microsoft was, well, if I'm getting a lot of small files, you might run into the Spark small file problem. If you don't know what it is, when Spark needs to read through a lot of small files, it's getting slower. It's not optimized to do that. It's optimized to read through files of somewhere around a gigabyte in size, something like that. So every now and then, these files need to be compacted. So I asked Microsoft what's happening under the covers on the Fabric side. They told me that every X hours, whatever, there's a process that checks on the files and merges them together into one big one to make sure you're not running into the small files problem. I've yet to see that work, but and they also told me there's a certain threshold before they start running that process, as it's quite compute and I/O intensive, and they try to balance that out. But it's still on my list to try out to see when it actually kicks off. But it should not be an issue. And there's also the other side of things, like what is this stuff costing you? Well, on SQL Server, you'll be paying in CPU cycles. It's a single-threaded operation. So one thread is every now and then checking on the updates. The rest is just doing what it has to do. It'll take some memory, but hardly noticeable. That's about it. You don't need to change anything on your license. If you're somewhere between 2016 and 2025, you're good. That's it. You might see some usage of network bandwidth because it needs, especially with the initial snapshot, it needs to push out a lot of data towards Fabric. That's it. You might see some Fabric storage cost when it's outside of your regular. It's not a license, but outside of your Fabric SKU. So if you've got an F2, you've got 2 terabytes of storage included. Should be enough mostly, but as a Parquet compresses nicely, but you might see some extra storage cost. Mirroring itself is free. So getting the data into Fabric, completely free. Whenever you start reading from the mirror database, that's when Microsoft will start billing you, because then you're using your capacity to actually read data and do something with it. Now, something about complexity, because is it really hard to do? Well, Azure Arc, yes, it's got some specific installation requirements. You need to be an Azure domain admin. So yeah, there might be complexity there, maybe not even in the process, but getting it authorized for your Azure environment. For SQL Server, you need highly privileged roles, and the CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer, will have questions. At least I hope so. You can answer them because you can show what the process is and how it works, but there will be questions. That's about the most complexity there is. All the rest I'll show you as well. It's not that hard. Security. Yes, you need some highly privileged roles to do this. You need to be owner, administrator, admin, and if you want to do maintenance, someone needs these roles. The thing is, the account used to connect to the database determines the data available. So if you're going to create a or if you're using an account that has SA, essentially, they can do everything, read all the data. So make sure you create an account that's only allowed to read the data that you actually want mirrored into Fabric. If you implement, for instance, dynamic data masking on sensitive columns, without the unmask permission to this account, your data will be anonymized, pseudonymized, whatever your favorite way of working is, in Fabric, which makes your data more secure. So you need to think about that one and think hard about it, because you need to work with that. So these are the commands I ran. I created a login. I gave them the correct permissions, and that was it. So, having said all this, let's go into the demo and see what happens, or if I'm gonna end up in the fire. So let me move this one, and we're in my Azure VM, where we've got a few things available. Let me first start in the Azure portal. So this is my resource group where I've got my SQL 25 environment. There are a number of databases here, but these are the databases you can see when you've set up your Azure Arc. So I can see my databases. I can see I've got my Plains data warehouse. And you can see some information like properties, backup stuff, collation. And that's about it. So it shows the database, but there's no way to interact with the database. It's just shown that it's connected to Azure using Azure Arc. That's it. So if somebody has a question like, I've got this database in the Azure Arc, and can people read from the database? Not through this. They need more. So when we're going into SSMS, we've got a few things here. I also must prevent myself to hit F5 without selecting stuff. As mentioned, I've created my login, I've created my user, I've created a user in my database, and I've given it the correct permissions. The other thing you need to check is if the managed identity from Azure has been connected correctly. So if I'm running this one, you should be able to see that I've got a system assigned identity from my tenant. This is my primary identity. So this means my database and Azure Arc are connected. One simple check. The second thing is I need to create my event session. I think I've already created that one. Database, that helps. My extended events management, extended events, sessions, SQL mirroring X session. So this one is reading quite a lot of data from what's actually happening with my mirroring. And when I looking in my live data, there should not be much happening right now because I've disabled the mirroring for now. But it is checking stuff. The other thing you can do is check the status of the of your change feed. So I can run this one, and it's not on master, it's on my other database, and here you can see what's happening. Now, why is it interesting? You can see a lot of GUIDs, workspace IDs, stuff like that appearing here. But it will also tell you which table is connected. And we'll see why this matters in a few minutes. It also shows you the snapshot current phase time when it was last created. And to show you that there are no things happening under the covers, when I'm running my CDC status, you can see my CDC is disabled. So there's no CDC running. All right. Let's go back to Fabric. I thought it was not good. No, that's the wrong one. This one. let's go to my workspace. And when you see in my manage access, you can see my VM SQL Service Principal added to my workspace, because that one, I need that one to be able to connect to my database. So I'm going to create a new item, a mirrored SQL Server. And now let's hope Fabric performance will not let me down. So I've got two connections. I've got an Azure database and I've got my SQL 2025 database. So I'm selecting this one. And it should start to connect to my database right now. And it's right now connecting to my database, trying to figure out which tables, which columns are there. What can we do? It already has been mirrored. Oh dear. I thought I'd cleaned that one up. Oh, not a Fabric warehouse. Well, let's see if we just ignore the error and click connect. Let's see if it really runs into an error or is just angry with me. Nope, it's really angry with me. All right, so just a bit of a pity, but let's quickly find out if I can check another database, because there should be this one connection, this one. All right, let's just do the so let's run this one on a different database, and let's go for, let me quickly check what's in here. Yeah, it should work. Let's see how quickly it picks up on this. Oh, I need to create a new connection, I guess. Maybe not. It's always interesting when you're doing live demos and stuff goes wrong. Yeah, I need to quickly create a new 25. Oh, this will be interesting to find out. Back. Maybe I can just change the connection. It is this one. I would like to change, please. Oh, the Joyce. The joys of creating new connections. Database demo 1. I think it was called demo. Let me quickly get my very secure password. Do not do this in production, please, because that will cause issues. It's always exciting to see spinners. Yes, connect. Whenever things break, everything breaks. So let's try once more. One. Yes, but I want to create a new one.
Somebody just said you need to specify instance name.
Ha, that's a good one. Thank you. Not sure who that was, but that's 25 SD. I'm always forgetting to specify the instance name because so many customers use just a standard instance name. Please connect without error. Not found or not accessible. All right. This process is breaking. So let me quickly find if there's another mirror database available. I think I had a second one. Mirror database. We can at least delete all of them to make sure I could do this. Let me quickly think if I can fix this. Well, this will take quite some time and take away from the content. So what I will do, I will create a video for this for you, what you should have seen. And I will also quickly show you what should have happened, because I can show you from my blog post and you've got at least some content. Let's see if that could. Right. Let me quickly drag this one in. Where did my window go? Oh no. Yeah, there we go. So what you should have seen, let me zoom in a little bit. I can find it well. In the end, you should have seen things like this, like the file structure on the in the OneLake, where you can actually read what's actually there. So in this structure, as I mentioned in the as I showed in the SSMS, there's a structure where you can see the files landing in a specific folder structure, files, landing zone. There's a GUID right here, and that GUID corresponds to the data you're actually uploading. So in this case, I checked out my temp imports, which got a table ID B8 whatever, and that corresponds to B8 right here. So you can actually see all the data flowing in. In this folder, you can see change data, JSON stuff. You can read it. You can find files like this, specific small CSV files. When you open them, you can actually see what's in there. So this comes back to the point I was trying to make around making sure that you anonymize your data. Make sure that you do that. Make sure that sensitive data is encrypted when it's entering Fabric, because when you're not doing that, you might run into data issues. Because this is just plain CSV, and if anyone can access your OneLake, they can see what's happening. So when I'm running insert queries, as I mentioned, you can see all these files appear, part files where you can see that they're actually being translated from the CSV to the parquets in the Delta structure. So you can also see when you're using the Synapse link trace that it's actually checking every 5 seconds. So you can this is 9 o'clock, 23, 28, 33, 38. So it's got a cadence of every 5 seconds checking what's happening. Other changes. Let me see. I didn't get a really good screenshot, I think, of what it actually looks like within Fabric. No, because this is the other stuff. All right. So my demo broke, for which I apologize. I'm sorry it did. As I mentioned, I will create a video for you and share it through my my GitHub, where you can actually see what was supposed to happen and how it should have worked, including all the steps on creating and how it actually changes the data. So as I mentioned, you can use extended events to find out what's happening on the box, to find out where things are running, where they're not running, and you can read from there to see what's happening. The wrong button. You can use the sysdm access process DMV to find out which processes are running, to find out which process is actually doing the work. It's as I mentioned before, some of these things are a little bit hidden. Hopefully, in the extended event, you can find out which process is actually doing the replication or the mirroring towards Fabric, and you can connect it to the running processes and find out if it's how much CPU it's taking, how much memory, and if it's a blocker, what you can do. Something else you can do is use Resource Governor to limit the impact on your running system. So you can tell it you can only use this much memory, cores, whatever, to make sure your production process doesn't break. The DMVs you can check as well. I'll show you them in the recorded demo. On the Fabric side, you've got your OneLake Explorer, where you can see a lot of the data come in, see what's happening there. Check if files are still being ingested, which is a way to find out if it's still working. The other thing is there's a, let's call it a play button, where you can see, well, it's running, you can stop and start it, or see some properties, but it's, again, as I mentioned, it's not that much. Within Fabric, that is. There are limitations. As And these limitations are prone to change. So I didn't want to go into these in depth. I just wanted to tell you there are limitations. It's a pain. Please check this page whenever you want to start working with it, because before you know it, yeah, if it breaks for your situation, that would be a shame. You can also find a way to work around it. So when it breaks, what should you do? Well, your first option is to restart from Fabric. So you stop it and restart it essentially, which means it will create a new snapshot, which is probably what broke on my side. But yeah, it will create a new snapshot, get all the data in, and move on from there. And all the increments will be based on that latest snapshot. So that's what's happening. The thing is, when you create a new snapshot, you've got that overhead of creating that snapshot and pushing it out towards Fabric. You can also restart it from SQL. The thing is, it might not be the best idea because the stored procedures are not that well documented. Let's put it like that. You really have to know what you're doing. And if you don't, or if you're under pressure or whatever, you might make a mistake, and that might break a lot. So the advice from Microsoft I got, because I asked them about this, like, does this work and how does this work? They said, no, they're there for a reason, but usually just for Microsoft support who've been trained for this. Also, make sure you've got your full backups running regularly and your incrementals and stuff like that to prevent a full log file or a full disk. Please don't put it on the C drive. I still encounter customers where essential files are put on the C drive. Like, just don't do that. It'll kill everything. So one of the questions, or the question that came up during the session is, what are the alternatives? Are there different ways to load data into Fabric? Yes, there are. As I mentioned, the first one, the copy job, which will help you create an incremental load quite easy based on a watermark column. And then you can incrementally load it. But you need to run that job, and the job will incur cost. It will use capacity, stuff will happen, and you will pay for it. You can use the copy data activity, which is kind of sort of the same, but a little bit different in the way that you need to configure more, but you've also got more configuration options, so that may be a better fit. You could use the Dataflow Gen 2, but make sure you've got the one that has CI/CD enabled, because that is much cheaper and faster. So don't go for the regular one, make sure it's a CI/CD enabled one. You could go wild and use DAB's MCP endpoint, use notebooks, create your own whole environment based on that. There are many options. You could also use DBT or other external tool sets. There's a lot of options available. You could use ADF if you want, as long as it can write into OneLake using that Parquet format with Delta to make sure the entire Fabric environment can read from it. I was supposed to go to the next slide for some. All right, something broke in the slide. So, looking in the mirror. My personal, but also professional opinion. I would urge you to try it out on a dev test environment. Anonymized data, small data set, easy to configure, easy to control, and easy to dump. Try out, see if it works, how it works, if it works for your situation. So you can check the load. You can decide if it's okay on your system. I know if you're running a small load, it will not be representative for the full one you might encounter in production, but you'll get there. But check it, work with it. Also make an honest comparison with the alternatives, like external access, like the predictability, the loads, the costs that it might incur or will incur. Make an honest comparison what works in your situation. then decide which route to go. And with that, I would say, go for it. Give it a try. See what happens. I think you'll be amazed.
Thank you, Rita. So now get into the questions and answers section.
Yes.
If you have any questions, people in the chat now. The first question is, how do you ensure only the right people have access to mirrored data in Microsoft Fabric?
Let me show you, because that part should still work. Because when you're looking at workspaces, this is essentially workspace access. So people who are not in this list, I've logged in as Fabric administrator, I've got access. This is the service principal. Anyone else will not see this workspace, will not see the items within this workspace, will not see the data. So one thing you can do is not give people access to the workspace, but give them access to items, like they can connect to the endpoint. You might want to fiddle with who is allowed to access which tables. But if I'm really honest, that's something that should be done before, because you're only mirroring data into Fabric that you need for your BI purposes or your AI stuff or whatever you're doing there. So make sure you're cutting off data as soon as you can, so you won't get data leaks or anything.
Perfect. Next
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Next question is, what new features in SSMS 22 support SQL Server 2025?
That's an interesting one. The funny thing is, SSMS is built to support almost every version of SQL Server. So it's not like there's specific things that are built for 2025. One of the things that works with most is the GitHub Copilot, if you want to use that, and specific functionality that's only available on SQL 2025. Yeah, that will only be visible for the database. So, for instance, graph tables, if you want to use regex or JSON or stuff like that, that'll show up within SSMS for a SQL 2025 database.
Perfect. That looks like all the questions. So on behalf of the ESPC community, I'd like to send a big thank you to you again, Rita, for taking time out today. Carry webinar. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So behold, you join us again next time for the next webinar. Oh, there's another question in, if that's right.
More questions. That's good.
You mentioned that the log is read or checked, unsure here, all 5 seconds. Is this true for 2016, 2022 as well, or only for 2025? And do you have an experience on data latency?
It's only true for 2025 because that's the change or the event string that's running. So that's checking every 5 seconds. The CDC will run continuously, but it's up to you to read that data. So there will be probably more latency. I did try it out, and I saw that the latency was a little over 5 seconds because SQL Server needs to check there's new data. That it does that every 5 seconds, and it needs to push the data towards Fabric, which will take some time. But it lands in CSV, so it needs to be converted to Delta. So I think my latency was somewhere about 30 seconds in the end, something like that. So, which was perfectly acceptable for my use cases, to be honest, because I'm not building a real-time system. There are different options to do real-time in SQL Server, because then you're going to connect it to the real-time intelligence part of Fabric.
Perfect. That's all the questions. So hope you join us for the next webinar, and take care. Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.